I've started to work on using ultrasound and harmonic resonance, almost like an opera singer with a wine glass, to selectively kill cancer cells. And did that. We've moved mice into remission of 100% deadly form of human cancer. I've been doing it my whole life, and many of my friends became billionaires or close to billionaires by creating open source companies. They were never interested in the money. They were interested in the scale and the impact. And so in an anti-innovation industry like healthcare, not meaning to be, that the regulatory agencies want more data. We all want more data. But collecting it serially rather than in parallel, how do you collect it in parallel? The simplest way to do that is by open sourcing.
I'm very happy to be here today with Mary Lou Jepsen. Mary is the CEO and founder of Openwater, a company working to shrink the power of an MRI machine into a wearable device. And her work sits at the crossroads, I think, of like neuroscience, healthcare, and AI, and could really reshape everything from diagnostics to human communication itself is something that you've also talked about. And before Openwater, I know, Mary Lou, that you co-founded One Laptop Per Child, you led display engineering work at Google X, and you worked on virtual reality at Oculus. So yeah, you have a really broad background behind you as well.
And that's just this century.
Yeah, exactly. Well, tell us more then. I know that, you've had this really multi-dimensional career. But I believe you have a little bit of a background in art, physics, engineering, now medicine. What made you realize that all of this could, converge meaningfully?
So I really started in holography, VR, and AR in the early 80s. I fell in love with, actually, as a kid, building these things, and made the world's first holographic video system, made these huge installation holograms that filled city blocks, and we reconstructed when the sun or the moon went into the right position, but became very interested in neuroendocrinology as a means of self-preservation. It took 17 years for my brain tumor to be diagnosed, which hit my pituitary gland. And the nervous system is connected to the pituitary gland through the hypothalamus. I have two of those, but not the third. As a result, I had to learn a lot about neuroendocrinology, which is how we turn our feelings into affecting different parts of our body and different parts of our brain and reacting to things, because I have to make that up myself because I don't have a pituitary gland. So I've been interested in that since dropping out of my PhD to go home to die, and then them finding the brain tumor and having a chance at a better life. And I obviously lived and take many different hormones and combinations of them every day since then for 30 years to stay alive. So unwittingly, I have great expertise in neuroendocrinology. So that's, of course, the neuro part of that I have been doing a deep dive on to live for a long time. And to realize in all of this, you have to actually get good at shipping. It's one thing to ship papers or students as a professor, but if you really want to change things and have impact, you've got to figure out how to take basic research and have it affect the world more quickly. I mention that because it's a time where at least the great American research institutes and universities are at a difficult time in terms of funding. But there's more VC than ever, and you can start companies and make your research go. And people say, oh, you VCs don't fund research. VCs have funded my research my entire career, but I've just had to ship it really damn fast. So my first company after that was starting the first microdisplay company, the first company dedicated to making microdisplays that enabled VR and AR and wristwatch video. And at that time, got rid of, people used to print out slides on transparencies and show them on overhead projectors. We enabled these front projectors. So that was my earlier claim to fame in the last century. All kinds of really innovative consumer electronics that people will tell you can't ship, and you have to do incremental innovation, but you don't. You just have to figure out how to use the big factories that exist in innovative ways. That's really what I do, is sort of with the physics and the math and the deep understanding of the processes, figure out how to use exactly that $10 billion fab to make, they call it a fab, a factory that makes high volume things in innovative ways.
I think that, you touched on it, your personal health story. Could you tell us a little bit, like, what was it that happened, and what is that like, maybe, how has that shaped you, and what do you think is like worthwhile working on now?
Right. So I've always wanted to work on healthcare, but especially like I went to MIT to be a professor to work on things like this, and also sort of exhalable displays like blow and then the thing appears in front of you and things like that. But really, in my final interview at the Media Lab, met up with Nicholas Negroponte and decided, boy, I can make a $100 laptop faster than I can do brain-computer interface. This is 2004 or 5. So did that. But my personal health journey, I think lots of people have lots of problems. Mine happened to be overwhelmed by whatever was happening that day. My health stuff, my body failing me from about age 13, where I spent many months in the hospital with an unknown disease. It took till I was 29 for them to understand what that was. So, as a result, I stopped procrastinating because I just didn't know when I'd be okay. And as a result, I got a lot more done, although I was usually hospitalized at the beginning, but sometime between a beginning project and end of project. But I could do the work of multiple people because I just worked all the time. It's because I loved it. It's all I could think about, and really got me good in lots of areas because I fell in love with holography, which is a part of VR and AR, which is what it's called now. And there was no department of holography. So as a result, you had to figure out how to swim in lots of different departments to get work done. And as a result, you became interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, antidisciplinary, whatever the prefix is, by just doing that so that you could get good at the human visual system, art, color, physics, engineering, computer science, lots of different fields and the sub areas of them, chemistry, whatever, like all of it. And so you just got good at picking up the lingo, figuring out how to get up to speed with the field, and being able to use the best of that field to look at the thing that I was interested in. So it's called constructionist learning. It's the thing that we are trying to enable with one laptop per child, where a child could have access to the Wikipedia and the world and be able to do what they were passionate about. So that popular form of education, it's thought to be expensive because if you've got one teacher in a huge classroom, it's broadcast rather than long tail, which long tail wins of different people's passions and learning at their own rate and so forth. So yeah, like a child of that.
Yeah. And I believe that, your personal experience with this has like maybe led you to work with the work that you do at Openwater.
Sure. I kept wanting to do it. Literally, when you have brain surgery and the MRI that saved my life wasn't covered in health insurance 30 years ago. It wasn't. I had to go off plan and spend it. I didn't know I needed it, but it ended up being extremely valuable. So you have an experience like that. And yeah, I have to have one every year to prove it. My pituitary gland hasn't grown back, so I can take the drugs I need to live every day because I don't have one, even though there's not a single example of that ever happening. It's just bureaucracy. But nonetheless, I think about it, like the size and shape of that thing and the cost hasn't changed. It's actually much more expensive than it was 30 years ago. It's actually the profit center for hospitals in the US. It's 90% gross margin. It's the most profitable room in the hospital. And I think that's ridiculous. From 1978 to 2012, no real opportunity to get into that. I didn't want to go into healthcare. People are sick in the hospital. I nearly died there. Why would I want to do that? I don't want to get out of the hospital. But 2012, I think, wow, maybe we can do a whole bunch of things. I had actually pitched doing brain-computer interface to Google as part of their starting up Google X and their moonshot factory. Why? I couldn't convince Sergey to do it. His wife at the time, Anne Wojcicki, had 23andMe. They called 23andMe a medical device and blocked her using it. And he's like, we can't do it. There's too much regulation. Don't want to do it. It takes forever. So, okay, whatever. He said no. And then I end up at Facebook because my background is really strongly in VR and AR and manufacturing and human visual system and making magical things happen that you can ship in volume with high quality. And Mark, I swear his feet didn't touch the ground in my interview with him after I started talking about what we could do. But then when I actually started, he's like, look, I bought this company. They haven't really ever shipped anything. You know how to ship this stuff. I really need you to do that. Okay. They were paying me really well and I was happy to do it. But after being there for a while and building up the team and creating all these new cool architectures that They could have shipped, but didn't for whatever reason. They chose a different path. I just thought, well, somebody's got to do this. And they paid me, boy, I've gotten to work for Sergey Brin and Mark Zuckerberg. Maybe I should just do it. I have enough money. Like I can't really, if I was extravagant, I would, but I have enough money to live for the rest of my life after stuff like that happens to you. And it doesn't really happen. You work really your ass off, but you also get really lucky. Both things happen. I mean, luck is preparation meets opportunity, something like that. But still, there's luck. I should do it. So I left as nicely as I could to take on trying to use the things I could see coming down the pike that with my budget, working for centa billionaires, with my budget just in those companies that just have very good profit margins and a lot of revenue, I knew what was going to come down the pike, what manufacturing processes were going to become enabled. Moore's Law hits, mixed signal, analog processes like that used in display and in light sensing and in any kind of sensing. So AR, VR, LiDAR, using that to read and write the body and brain-computer interface, body-computer interface, to treat all diseases, mental disease, cancers, cardiovascular disease, and yes, enable non-invasive brain-computer interface or communication as well. So I started to do that and really looked broadly. And here's the thing, now it's been 9 years and VCs invite me over, and the ones that don't fund me, I become friends with. And they're like, well, we thought you were crazy. I'm like, why didn't you just say so? Like, it was really solid. You could have had it vetted. But when you say things that sound so crazy, that's because we should try to do the impossible. Like, why not? I want somebody to not be on anybody's roadmap to do it, because if it is, then everybody else will do it. I want to do something different with my time that's seemingly impossible, but make it possible. And I think a lot of people, it's almost like you should do them, but not show them to the entrepreneurs, because if they thought everybody, like that whole book by the Singularity book by, what's his name? I can't read it because Kurzweil, whatever. He's like, this will happen in mid 2022. Well, I get that it's useful, but it's not that motivating, because we think that we're cogs in the machine and we have to think that we're not. And it is true, whatever Darwin and Wallace discovered, survival of the fittest around the same time. Things happen around the same time. It's in the air. I do get that too. It's interesting. Maybe we should just grow up as entrepreneurs. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So yeah, I jumped in and started working on that. Yeah, first MRI 1,000 times cheaper, but really spent the first 3 years, and I didn't want to take any funding from anybody. I don't want to get on that 3-year treadmill of ship a product that I've been on my entire life, because this is too important. If we spend an extra 2 years to do something that's 100 times bigger, we're going to do that. And so it wasn't on a timeline. It wasn't planned. It was just an exploration of what we could do with the engineering, the physics, and the manufacturing, and the computer science, and AI obviously has been explosive in the last 9 years using that. And what can we do? And so we made a lot of progress on MRI 1,000 times cheaper, but really in early 2020 decided it's time to get into the hospitals, and was able to create a system that sees blood flow, just a subsystem, 20 times better than multi-million-dollar MRI or CT or anything else. Super useful for identifying stroke early, which is the number 2 cause of death. So getting that proven and in ambulances could save 6.5 million lives a year. So how can you not ship a product like that? And then started to work on using ultrasound and harmonic resonance, almost like an opera singer with a wine glass, to selectively kill cancer cells. And did that. We've moved mice into remission of 100% deadly form of human cancer, glioblastoma, by resonating, finding the resonant frequency of it using frequency sweeps of really low intensity ultrasound, lower intensity than used on pregnant women and their fetuses for the last 50 years in rich countries, with great results. And then we changed the frequency, and we're turning on and off neurons, and we're taking nearly half of the patients in a study we did of severe treatment-resistant depression into remission. But we can turn on and off any neurons or nerves. We're now doing amyloid microclots, which are the hallmark of long COVID, also diabetes, a neurodegenerative disease, and aging itself. And at a certain ultrasound frequency, we're destroying 95% of those microclots and the rest of them that are alive, not alive, still clotted rather, go from 30 microns average size to 5 microns. That's a really big deal because capillaries are 5 to 10 microns in width at the smallest amount, which means the big microclots can't get through your capillaries, which means cells die around the capillaries that don't have blood flow. So that's a really big deal. So that's early work, but the implication is a universal device that can treat all cancers, all mental disease, all cardiovascular disease. We also think we can deactivate pathogens by just putting this thing on your wrist or the back of your knee where the blood flows through it with a resonant frequency of, say, COVID. There's papers on this. We haven't tried the COVID yet. We went with the microclots first because long COVID, something like 100 million people have long COVID right now. So we thought that was more important given the COVID is, COVID's awful too, but there's many pathogens. So there's a lot of things that we can do with this by using the fact that infrared light, ultrasound at low levels, and electromagnetics penetrate our body and brains, and we can modulate it in really powerful ways because of Moore's law by using new chips. But no one else does that because the healthcare system is effectively anti-innovation. It takes 20 to 40 years to ship a product because they collect the data. They have to collect a lot of data. And the assumption is you have to do that serially. So if you do that serially and take 20 years to collect it, which is common, the average drug takes something like 26 years to get a regulatory approval. The average complex therapeutic medical device, 13 years. It's a long time. People are dying during that time. Can't they collect the data faster? And guess what? Moore's law, you don't have the same manufacturing process 26 years later. You can do that with drugs, I guess. But, drugs are different risk. You're making a chemical that's never existed before and injecting it into the human body. So you want to test it for a long period of time. Ultrasound has been tested and shown safe on billions of people for 100 years, like tens of billions of people. Same with infrared light, same with electromagnetics. We know the safe levels. Could there be an event? Of course, but the average drug is approved with 1,000 tested, maybe 10,000 for a big disease. So we have a lot of data, and we're using it, again, at diagnostic levels with the ultrasound in terms of the infrared to see blood flow really accurately. We're just looking at the phase of this and modulating the phase and the rhythm and the frequencies in ways that haven't been possible because people that ship medical devices don't know about advanced consumer electronics because why would they? They take 20 years to ship a product. It's like a friend of mine's an astronaut. The stuff they have on the NASA is really old. So why not use the tools of our time that aren't just AI, but Moore's law, one of the most powerful engines we've had to transform healthcare. And so, part of that to be able to do that was going open source. I made the company open source. Vitalik gave me a lot of money to do it. Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, $50 million to try the experiment. But the reason the experiment was worthwhile is a business reason. It's not to be like a not-for-profit. We're a for-profit, but you can't use Moore's law if you can't hit scale. Open source enables scale, trust, and iteration in a way the healthcare industry doesn't. So it's a worthy experiment given it is the engine of technology that healthcare is in, I feel, the land that time forgot. In not really recognizing that a World War II number of people die every year, 55 million people die every year, year in, year out, and we wait 20 years to get an approval. The COVID vaccine was the exception, not the rule, which is why that was so remarkable. And so the devices we're making, right now, we're selling them for $10,000. We'll take that down in order of magnitude over the next couple of years as we hit volume. So a device for the cost of a smartphone. So a treatment for the cost of a phone call for cancer, for mental disease. In the US, the leading cause of bankruptcy is health expenses. Literally leading cause of bankruptcy. It's 25% of our economy. It's incredible. If you want to fix, this is a big problem. With the CRISPR tools, it's taking longer to get approval. CRISPR's cool, and I'm not anti-CRISPR in any way. I'm just thinking but people are dying now. Why don't we work on these techniques? Why do we fund things for R&D without thinking about what they'll cost when they ship. A CRISPR, again, I'm pro CRISPR, but a CRISPR treatment is $3 million. The one that gets rid of hemophilia with one shot. Pretty cool that they can do that. Really cool. It shouldn't be me that points out most people don't have $3 million. The vast majority. So we're designing treatments. 9 out of 10 healthcare dollars in R&D come from governments and non-government organizations funding things that will cost the average new drug. A treatment course costs $300,000 when approved. Why are we doing it that way? Like a nonprofit hospital charges $10,000 a night for a room. That's not really nonprofit, is it? There's profits being made. It's legally nonprofit, but not, is it uppercase nonprofit or not? But not actually nonprofit. There's a lot of profits in the system. So why not make it up on volume? Because so many people are dying. We have, billions of people in the world. Why not do what we did in technology? Get everybody to have it. Larry and Sergey could have said, no. People get search if they pay for it. Or Apple could have charged $1 million a piece for the iPhone. I know people who would have spent it. But the idea is it's the network. Isn't understanding biology more important? Because that's what you get if you get a device out there or whatever, the therapies out there that can save everybody for everything. So asymptotically, right? Not obviously, we don't think we can do that for everybody with our current device. But when you look at the modern smartphone, we have 2 modules shipping now. Open Motion, which sees blood flow or any kind of micro movement, tremors in the body, extraordinary precision. And this harmonic resonance, where you can dial in the resonance of any cell and selectively stimulate a stem cell or rejuvenate a senescent cell. There's lots of papers on that. We have not done that with our device. We've used it for cancer treatments, mental disease treatments, and microclots that are, as I've mentioned. But really, there's 15,000 papers published on using low-intensity focused ultrasound for hundreds of diseases, using multi-million-dollar lab rigs and things, and not even doing the harmonics as much as, well, there's a couple papers, but we're the first really in human that we're aware of to do that. But if you think of the modern smartphone, right, I've got one here. 15 years ago, Apple was new. Mine's a Google one. But the key thing about it, it's got 4 different cameras in it, 9 different radios, an accelerometer, an ultrasound thing, 250 lasers. That's where we could go with these devices, is make a handheld hospital that can treat the hospital. The future of the hospital is maybe asymptotically, there is no hospital. The hospital is wherever you are. We've got the AI coming online. We've got people can use Zoom now. But then what is actually going to physically change your body and treat the disease if you can diagnose it? Why not selectively solve the problem? Surgery without the knife, etc. So that's what we're doing. And it's all open source and it's low cost. And we're scaling out, and we've got hundreds of customers, and we should be in, 100 clinical trials by the end of the year. And just as a matter of measure, that's more than even CRISPR's in, which is, again, I'm for whatever works, and they're doing great, and other things are doing great. What's been ignored, though, is using consumer electronics, because 13 years to ship a product means you can't. So why not ship it faster? Question. Collect data faster, so open source it, which you can't open source a regulatory approval, by the way. We can't open source our ISO 13485, our quality standard, which means when people get their regulatory approval, they have to ship with our thing. But what we can open source is how to make it. We're shipping, and by making more of something, we can make it cheaper. For every 10x more you make of something, it's a slight exaggeration to say it's 10x cheaper, but it's only a slight exaggeration. And so therefore, by lowering the price through volume, we enjoy a portion of that as our profit by making the pie bigger and enabling better solutions faster where the people are at. So that's the bigger goal globally, especially in low and middle income countries who, a lot of countries are still really mad about the way the vaccine rollout went. I know here people are anti-vax, but the rest of the world wanted them and suffered a lot more casualties because they didn't have access to it. So how can we make something that rolls out fast? Well, we do that in consumer electronics. We're We're talking because of them. So let's do it that way. That's the premise. That's the experiment. Could we fail? Sure. If we get 50% of the way, that would be great. If we get 5% of the way, that would be great.
Yeah. And you touched on the open source point that, you're open sourcing everything that you can open source basically. And you had Vitalik Buterin and support you in doing that. So it would be really interesting to hear just like, how did that even come about? And also like, if we want to do this speed up that, very much describing like all these examples of like, we really need it. But how could we get more medical companies to open source things? Is that on the table? How do we get it on the table?
But showing it works. I've been doing it my whole life, and many of my friends became billionaires or close to billionaires by creating open source companies. They were never interested in the money. They were interested in the scale and the impact. And so in an anti-innovation industry like healthcare, not meaning to be, it's that the regulatory agencies want more data. We all want more data, but collecting it serially rather than in parallel. How do you collect it in parallel? The simplest way to do that is by open sourcing. We're requiring everybody using our devices, for example, to share the safety information. So you asked about how Vitalik came to it, how this unfolded. Somebody introduced me to Vitalik, and I only communicated on certain apps, and I have too many apps, and just really anyway. So I finally got on Signal and started talking to him. And then we started having these VCs and just sort of talking. He thought I could cure COVID. And this was like 2 years after COVID started. And I'm like, look, if I thought I could have helped with COVID, I would have dropped everything 2 years ago. But we kept talking, and he asked such interesting questions. And that's where I tend to spend my time. He's coming from this really different perspective, from crypto and blockchain and all this stuff. So I talked to him, and I tended, when it was convenient for him, it tended to be 10 o'clock on a Friday night where I was in the Bay Area. I'm often. And so as a startup CEO, what else do I have to do but think about the most interesting questions all weekend? So by Sunday night, I would have written up, a few pages on the discussion. He brought some other people into these meetings who were quite amazing. I'd love to sing their praises at some time when they're comfortable with that. But with it, we just talk about how the whole thing evolved, and we wrote up new rules at that time. So we got these lawyers at Gunderson Datmer and another organization to sort of write up new corporate documents where a company couldn't get out of that commitment. So we did that. It took a while to do that because there were lots of people from the whole community of open source poking holes and sort of figuring out. But we went full AGPL, which is the most permissive, Creative Commons 4.0 share alike, took all, I think it was 68 of our patents, and made them free to use for anybody, for any reason, except for one. They can't use them to sue us or our customers. That's it. And that's in perpetuity. Everything we do will be, in the future, AGPL and Creative Commons 4.0, as well as any patents free to use to anybody for any reason whatsoever. So that's pretty radical open source. That's not open so you can use the software, but if you ship a product, you have to give us money, which is some of the open source that's called. But still, it's progress. If you can see how the code works, you can make better code. So it's fantastic that that's happening. As Mary Meeker showed in her report that was released last Friday, open source AI has really hit consciousness in January when the Chinese group open sourced it. I'm trying to remember their name. Do you remember it?
DeepSeek.
DeepSeek, right. So, her take on it is sovereign nations will use OpenAI. Literally open source AI, not OpenAI, which is closed source or whatever. I don't know. I haven't followed the state of exactly how Sam is doing that ballet. He is kind of amazing to watch. So, but sovereign nations. So her analysis is like in the commercial area, these sort of kind of like Llama's sort of open source and sort of not open source. My friend Jan LeCun would probably disagree with me. So sorry, Jan, if you're watching, but there are restrictions on what you can do for product with it. But it's still cool that you get to see how it works and build on it and use it and so forth, which is great compared to others. But we're full open. because we have hardware that we make, there's this whole big saying back when Richard Stallman used to call it free software, and it would be free as in speech, not free as in beer. Like, you can have the recipe for the beer for free, but if you buy the beer, you don't get the free beer. And there is actually an open source beer. It's called BrewDog. They publish their recipes, but they don't give away the beer. They give away the recipes, but you know it's quality ingredients and how it's made and so forth. So that's what we do, but we still sell, by analogy, the beer, which is the medical device, which are hard to make. I mean, here's the design for our laser. Try to make it. It's really hard to make lasers and ultrasonic transducers and put the whole system together in a mixed signal way. It's very hard, and we do it well with our manufacturing partners, and we sell that for some profit. But the designs are freely available for anybody else to make, change, improve, do better than us, and we'll probably collaborate with them if they'll have us, because we'd like to make it better too. So that's a way to actually grow inorganically, to make the pie bigger, to solve the large problem, which is healthcare isn't moving fast enough. Anyway, so Vitalik, investors, and then how will other people do it? I suppose we need more people coming into the medical industry from different industries, particularly tech, because tech, open source, is the engine of innovation in technology. Sure, the whole crypto community, but Android, AWS, Apple runs on Linux, many, many more examples. I mean, Red Hat delivers the profits for IBM. So it just is, you can make something for 1 billion people faster if you can see how it works. Also, of course, we have really great AI tools now too that also help with that as well. But that allows us to innovate more quickly. That is novel for healthcare. It's getting the data to see if it's safe for people and efficacious. And to do that, what you want to do is do it at something known safe levels of things, and then collect across, like, pan-cancer. So lots of our customers are trying different types of cancer. This works with any cancer. All metastatic cancers have a really big nucleus and a really small cytoplasm. It's the hallmark of it. For a pathologist to look under a microscope, that's metastatic cancer. Well, it has a different resonant frequency. Like, I do have a wine glass here. So if I ping this wine glass, I match the frequency, and if I was an opera singer or something, I could then burst this wine glass and harm nothing else in the room. Well, that resonant frequency, the pitch and the rhythm, are different for different cancers that are also not great cells. They're not really well built because they're aggressive, and aggressive means fast dividing, which is unlike the healthy cells in our body. So we can selectively tune in those cells, but other cells too. And we can focus anywhere we wish to. We can focus to millimeter level. Where we focus is at a diagnostic level, lower level than pregnant women and their fetuses have been exposed to across their whole abdomen and the baby's whole body for the last 50 years. So we think it's safe. But why not shrink the device to the best it could be with our manufacturing processes and then scale and get the data? It's a lot faster. You don't have to go through the regulatory process twice. But no one thinks like that because doctors don't learn consumer electronics. They take biochemistry. They're comfortable with pharma. They learn Latin. They learn anatomy. They're not anti-physics or anti-consumer electronics in any way. They just don't think of it. So it's sort of this world meeting where they've got their smartphones, they've got their portable ultrasound units that are replacing the stethoscopes. Even the stethoscope itself took 30 years to be adopted back in the early 1800s. It's just a slow thing. You have to learn about it in med school to adopt it. But, the people that want to live, counting on them to fight for their lives, to get us through the clinical trials, and all these companies and countries and patients. We have lots of patients that are starting their own clinical trials with their family. Usually there's a family member that's sort of running it because the person that's really sick, it's really hard for them to do much because they're sick. They have basically a statistical death sentence in a year or two. And so their family's trying to do something. So what would happen when the patient groups own the regulatory approvals? What do you think they'd charge for the use of the? Probably reasonable, right?
Yeah, hopefully. And it seems like you're on good track to, at least with Openwater, making great progress on this and hopefully doing the thing of actually showing that it works and getting more people on board. And there's also
So it's been shown it works since the 50s, by the way, just to say, and 1 million people treated.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. That is crazy. I think that, a bit of a jump, but in doing my sort of research before this interview, because this is the Existential Hope podcast. And so I want to hear what your favorite positive vision of the future is. And it could be just like as wild and as weird as possible. Just, whatever comes to mind. I was thinking of, for example, I know that you've spoken a bunch about telepathy, for example. That would be fun.
I'd say it's this technology makes life better. There's a way of looking at all changes in history. James Burke read a book about it when I was coming up in the 70s called Connections, about a way of looking at history where all changes are from technology. Now, handling technology is important, but killing technology and saying, no, we don't want to know about it, we want to bury our heads in the sand is a life I don't want to leave. So the vision of the future for me, I suppose, is can everybody believe that learning and knowledge is interesting to make a better life? In specifics, sure, if we can enable brain-computer interface, is that the end of war because we'd actually understand ourselves? Or is it our nature to want to control others, as many of them as possible? Is it the end of love? Is it the beginning of understanding? Can we do more together in a collaborative way? Is it not that? I mean, all of that will have to be worked through, and many people will try different government systems as that comes up. But it could eliminate our loneliness and isolation. So there's this, like, how do we want to be? And how do we talk about what we want to be? Certainly it would be very convenient in terms of communication. Like, I think it'll be tokenized, basically. Like, you'll let certain parts of what you want to share out, and you'll keep what you want as your innermost thoughts to yourself, or perhaps relationships where you wish to share your innermost thoughts, where they can be exploited. So do we still want to understand how the brain works? Do we not want to understand how the brain works when mental disease and neurodegenerative disease take so many lives? By understanding how the brain works too, in successive approximation, asymptotically getting to that understanding is interesting. But the brain and body are made of the same essential things. So let's not delete the body from it, because those have diseases and things that we could optimize as well. And they're connected by hormones that act as, they're the only things that act at a distance where the brain can communicate with the belly or the leg or the whatever. Like it's, and the nerves run down, of course, the lung nerves. But there's all this fear. There's basically every movie ever that I've ever seen of it. And yet there's so little done on what we could be capable of if we could communicate better. And there's a belief that we should be able to communicate better if we could communicate with higher bandwidth than speech or text. So why not try it, since we have to do it anyway, to cure mental disease and neurodegenerative disease. Although maybe it's nice to end with the words of the great Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft, with whom I talked about this a lot. He's founded the Allen Institute of the Brain. And he would say, Mary Lou, there's 5 Nobel Prizes just to understand how a neuron works. We're not going to get there. And I was like, Paul, you go win those 5 Nobel Prizes, but I can use whatever. I can use a cell phone without understanding how a transistor works or how quantum works. So there's things that you can do with it that could be quite powerful. We're scared of people knowing what we think. Like, apparently, I'm not saying anybody's lying, but apparently you hear 25 to 30 lies a day from people around you. They might just say, oh, that was delicious, whatever I made. And they're just trying to be nice, but it wasn't to them delicious. It could be just our notion of manners. And those would have to change to be more truthful, or we put filters on it. Whatever, like there's solutions to it. But I think this great negativity that we have to approach brain-computer interface from a negative point, not a positive point, except for quadriplegics and stuff like that, is somewhat absurd. And I don't quite understand why the negativity. There are some great sci-fi novels that explore it from a positive perspective. But I'm not actually working on that right now. I decided that it's actually easier to focus on curing all cancer, mental disease, neurodegenerative disease, and cardiovascular disease with a universal device. And that's not controversial. But where that leads is it's a step in getting to brain-computer interface. And other people are working actively on it. I keep getting asked by reporters what I think of Neuralink. And I said, well, what I think is pretty much there's 100 other companies doing much more interesting work than Neuralink. And they don't publish that because Elon gets clicks. So I think one thing that would be helpful is to stop. Elon gets a lot of press. Let's talk about all the other great work that all the other great neuroscientists and neuro companies are achieving from lots of different points of view. We're working from a certain point of view. We look at the work of some other great companies and researchers and just sort of people that have worked 40 years in this field and have accomplished great things in our understanding of it. And let's talk about Jack Gallant or Tom Oxley, or there's a lot of people doing really great, Ed Boyden. There's all these people that are doing great work, and you guys fund him. Yeah. So there's a bunch of others that aren't on that pedestal that are actually doing the work and have the discussions with them. Neuro Rights organization is a pretty interesting organization. Speaking of that, the law just changed in Montana. Neural rights will be private. Your neuro data in Montana will be private. You can keep it confidential. You can be right to forgotten. It would be the extension of that. Chile did that a number of years ago. It got revoked, but Montana, the state of Montana, recently passed it. So if the issue is if all your thoughts are out on the internet, no, you can have confidentiality in private. The way Chile did it is said, it's part of your medical data. That's the way we're approaching it with the use of ours. Is it's part of the regulatory approval. So you have the privacy laws if you wish them from healthcare. I happen to think HIPAA is too constrained and have released my data and anti-HIPAA, everybody can have all my data, but it's a choice and you can make that choice and you can change your decision if you want to keep something private or whatever. And we can have all those discussions, but there's this notion that it's all over. And I think we don't talk about the reason Openwater is called Openwater. It came from an essay from Peter Gabriel, who's an investor and actually a sweat equity in the starting of Openwater. An essay he wrote about the future brain-computer interface of basically we have to take swimming lessons to learn about our thoughts flowing like water, and that they will flow everywhere to everybody. And how will we learn to deal with that? It's something we need to learn to deal with, but it's inevitable. It enables interspecies communication. It enables us to understand each other and language and culture and so forth, and start to get at that. There'll be misunderstandings, there always are, but
yeah.
It's funny. Jason Ponton, when I told him about it, thought it would be the end of love, that you need secrecy to be really in love, which I thought, really? Do you think so? He was the former editor-in-chief of Technology Review at MIT. But I remember doing this podcast with Fox News, and the guy, Greg Butag, somebody like that, he said that he thought it would be the end of war because we'd understand each other. Fox News guy. Really? I think we'll probably find some way to have war anyway, sadly, but that would be great. It's a nice vision.
I think it's a nice vision, and it's maybe a nice vision to sort of put a wrap around this interview, because I think that is one of the things that, if I think, what is a bottleneck maybe in a lot of the things that we've been talking about, is human nature and challenges that need to be overcome in terms of communication in many ways, and biases and so on. And so there obviously are a lot of challenges to having your thoughts open to everyone, but also in terms of what I think is really exciting is applications of neurotech and how they could maybe help expand empathy and these sort of things. And the end of war point is a nice one to end on, maybe.
Yes.
Fingers crossed.
Empathy is what it can enable. And also being able to step into somebody's shoes. Can we get into somebody else's brain